Ever wanted to feel like an unstoppable tank that can still put out decent damage? Welcome to another build video where we do just that. I call this build the Knight of American Techno-Feudalism build. A name this dumb is probably reducing our damage by 15% amplified, but whatever. A better name is probably the Filthy Casual build for people who like me who don't want to take a hurricane force shower in my own sweat while I'm trying to relax and play a game. I tried to make our boy here look as futuristic as possible since he's using nanobots to repair his armor and shield and whatnot, but yeah, I tried my best. This build isn't the most optimized meta build, but it is the most consistent solo close quarters mission clearing build that I have and is very forgiving. So if you hate using armor kits, hate going down, love high rate of fire weapons, love using a shield and playing out of cover, this build could be for you. It's not novel, I definitely wasn't the first person to come up with it, but I think it's interesting to talk about why this build works and how we can tune it to be more effective. Let's dive in. Hey agents, it's Dispatch. Welcome to the channel, where we talk about the math, builds, lore, and game design of Tom Clancy's The Division 2. Let's get stuck into it. This build lets you run straight up to heroic enemies and shoot them down with basically no risk of going down. The amount of repairs on this build can be crazy. We've got 4-piece of Foundry, Grupo Obliterate Chest, Memento Backpack, Chameleon, Striker Shield, Striker Drone. Throw on a rifle for longer range targets. This build is specifically designed to work around the Chameleon, so let's talk about the Chameleon's nuances first. The Chameleon is an SMG AR hybrid. It acts as an SMG in almost every way: low optimal range, poor accuracy, high stability, and high crit chance. However, it also has the benefit of AR's 21% damage to health and the downside of taking Fenris instead of Sokolov. Lastly, its base damage is really low, even for a 900 RPM weapon. The redemption for this weapon comes through its talents, which are significant. The Chameleon requires a lot of stacking to activate its talents. Because stacking is based on hits, and due to the poor optimal range and accuracy of the weapon, we need to play close to the enemy to increase its effectiveness. In order to play close to the enemy and given its lackluster starting damage, we need a significant amount of repairs to help us stay out of cover. This is where the shield and the Foundry armor cores and Memento come into play. But Dispatch, you might say, you're always saying armor cores are less efficient and weapon damage cores and skill tiers are better. Well, yes, most of the time, and if you want to min-max your build, you could change over to some of those cores. But we're not actually losing that much because of the talents, so let's get into those. Headshots give you 20% critical hit chance and 50% critical hit damage. For comparison, this is basically the perfect killer talent plus the SMG critical hit chance stat in one buff. Nutty. Because of this, we only want to shoot for around 40% critical hit chance on this build and throw the rest into weapon handling or critical hit damage. Currently, we've got 40.5, which is good enough for me. Body shots give you 90% weapon damage. This is why we can get away with so many armor cores and skill tiers. Weapon damage is additive, so we're getting less and less multiplicative damage as we increase the number of weapon damage cores. This talent gives us a full 6 reds worth of weapon damage. In order to get this buff, we need the repairs and enough health and armor pool to soak up the incoming damage. Once the buff is active, we can really increase our damage. Lastly, and most underrated, is the leg shot buff. Most content creators that I've seen don't even use this buff, but I personally always activate it first. Why? Because the less time you're spending reloading, the higher your sustained DPS, the faster you'll stack, and the faster you'll stagger the enemies for less incoming damage. Each one of these buffs expire after 45 seconds of being activated in combat. If a buff is still active when combat ends, it refreshes this timer and you'll have the buff activated with 45 seconds remaining the next time you're in combat. Any buff that isn't active will remain at the current stack level. The leg shot buff is critical for activating those stacks so you can have them all active and kill the enemies within 45 seconds. If you're struggling with this, play more aggressively or stack them all to almost full and then activate them all at once. Due to this 45-second mechanic, this is perfect for most missions, especially close quarters missions, because each room of the mission can be cleared within 45 seconds. Sometimes you'll even go out of combat between waves in the same room, making it even easier to maintain stacks. However, open world, countdown, raids, PvP, DZ, etc. aren't suited for this weapon due to the timer and range limitations. You can certainly try it, just pay attention to your stacks and if you can keep the buffs active. Same thing goes for group play. Enemy health pools are much bigger, which helps you stack, but also engagements can take longer so your buffs might time out before you can make full use of them. Foundry just got a buff from TU20, now it does even more repair. Even though it's now outdated, check out my repairs breakdown videos in the description to see how much repair it did, and just remember that it's even better now. If you'd like me to update the repair videos, just let me know in the comments and I'll add it to the list. I chose Obliterate as the chest piece because upfront damage is actually counterproductive to the build. The faster you kill the enemy, the less stacks you'll get. The idea with this build is that you start weak, but once you're able to turn the corner by getting the buffs, then you're unstoppable. With Memento, Intimidate is also a very good option that will give you much more damage, but I like the consistency of Obliterate. Since we've got so many armor cores, running a shield makes a lot of sense. The Striker shield gives us a decent amount of amplified damage, more than the additional weapon damage core we would get from Technician. The shield also allows us to maintain that closeness with the enemy, whereas playing in cover makes this quite awkward. The shield also adds a ton of repair and deep shield health pool to take that incoming damage. No other skill will be able to keep up with us out of cover. The second skill is whatever you choose, but the Reviver Hive is always the safe bet. I've got the Assault Drone for distracting the enemies. It's skill tier 1, so it does a little bit of extra damage and helps distract the enemies if I need. Overall, we've got one skill tier, a couple of armor cores, a ton of armor regen and bonus armor when we get stacked, a ton of repairs, and a decent amount of damage. Our crit damage isn't winning any world records, but it's passable at about 144% without buffs. We could have it higher if I had a better Foundry piece with a crit damage instead of a crit chance, then I could roll off the weapon handling on the chest. That would put us at 206 critical hit damage with the Chameleon buff. Memento is putting in a ton of work here. Also check out IKEA's Tech Tank Masterclass video in the description where he mentions Memento's skill efficiency is actually giving skill health, which I never even thought about before I saw his video. Check out the description below. Memento is also giving us skill damage for our drone, armor regen and bonus armor for when we take damage from other directions, and of course more weapon damage. With this fully stacked in the Chameleon buff, we're looking at 215% weapon damage multiplier. That's a lot of damage. So that's the primary version of the build. What other ways can we tune this? Well, since we get tons of crit chance and crit damage from the weapon and its talents, we'd be losing efficiency using those 4 minor attribute slots. For example, we'd be losing 4 critical hit chance slots for 24% critical hit chance loss, but we're getting 20% from the weapon and 50% critical hit damage, so it's no big deal. Instead, we can run gear sets that have more power. Striker is a great choice if you don't need as much survivability, really playing that exponential power increase via stacking. Throw on some armor cores to boost your survivability and maybe switch to Technician with the Artificer. The extra handling and rate of fire will help you stack faster. Hunter's Fury is of course a good choice because we're close to the enemy, it's bonus stacks, it crowd controls for higher hit percentage, and it repairs our armor. Negotiators is also great because it utilizes crits and spreads our damage to health. Our fast reloads also drive our sustained damage to the max. Heartbreaker is also decent, with the main caveat being that it's just less good than Strikers. The pulse mechanic is a little buggy, and we don't have the accuracy to necessarily hit the heads of enemies for it. I wouldn't recommend using this unless you have a reliable way to pulse, like a teammate, scanner drone, scanner pulse, or decoy. Alright agents, nothing novel with the build itself in this one, but I hope I was able to add something to the conversation through our discussion. Let me know what else you think down below. How could this build be improved and what works for you? Also be sure to let me know if you enjoy the build videos or if I should focus on other content. I love to hear from you guys, so keep it up. Once again, agents, this has been Dispatch. Take care out there.